AI has become incredibly good at generating human language. Unfortunately, we've also become incredibly good at describing AI in human terms. And I'm not convinced that's always helping. In fact, I think sometimes it makes AI seem much more human than the evidence actually justifies. I recently watched a talk by Claude from Anthropic at ARC 2026 called Understanding AI in 14 Minutes. It was an interesting talk, but it also reminded me of something I've been thinking about for quite a while. If our goal is to help people understand AI, then the words we choose matter just as much as the technology we are trying to explain. One thing Chloe says, which I completely agree with, is that language is deeply human. It's how we express ideas, emotions, beliefs, and knowledge. It's one of the main ways we understand each other. But if language is that important, shouldn't we be even more careful with the language we use to describe machines? My concern isn't really about the research itself, it's about the way some of the conclusions are presented. Because words don't just describe things, they also shape how people think about them. If we use human words to describe machines, people will naturally start thinking about those machines in human ways. For example, the talk describes finding a representation of fear inside the model. That's fascinating, but my first question is very simple. How do we know it's fear? More specifically, how do we connect whatever was found inside the model to what fear actually means in humans? That's a very big step, and I'd love to understand how that step is made. Maybe there is an excellent answer to that question. Maybe the evidence is incredibly strong. My point is simply that I don't know what the evidence is, and just based on the talk, I couldn't figure it out. And if we are going to use words like fear, I think we should also explain why that word is the right one, rather than just assuming everyone will accept the label. The same thing happened later in the talk when the model was described as capable of cheating in order to get a reward without completing its task. Again, that's an interesting observation, but before I conclude that the model somehow came up with the concept of cheating on its own, I'd want to know what was done to make sure that behavior wasn't simply a result of the way the model was trained or the way the experiment was designed. That, in my opinion, is also a very important part of the story. Think of it this way. These models are trained on an enormous amount of human knowledge. They've seen books, articles, conversations, code, and stories. Pretty much every aspect of human behavior, including cheating, deception, and cooperation, of course. So before saying that such behaviors suddenly emerged within the model itself, I'd like to know what was done to rule out the possibility that it was simply using things it had already learned. I would also be curious to know what controls were built into the experiment. What was done to make sure that the model wasn't being pushed towards that behavior by the way it was trained, by the way the reward was designed, by the overall setup of the experiment. Those details seem to me just as important as the headline itself. None of this means that the researchers are wrong. It simply means that whenever we make a strong claim, we should also explain why we think that claim is the best explanation. That's how good science works, not by avoiding questions, but by answering them. The reason I personally care about this isn't because I'm trying to downplay AI. Quite the opposite. I think AI is one of the most important technologies we'll probably see in our lifetimes. But precisely because it's so important, I think we owe people explanations that are as clear and as careful as possible. I also worry that when we describe AI using words like fear, cheating, or sabotage, many people stop thinking about a tool and start thinking about a mind. Maybe one day that comparison will make perfect sense. I honestly don't know. But that time is not now. I don't think our language should get there before the evidence does. To me, AI is already extraordinary. We've built machines that can help us write software, solve problems, analyze information, learn new skills, and create things that would have taken us much longer on our own. That's an incredible engineering achievement. It doesn't become more impressive just by making it sound more human. So to conclude, my takeaway from the talk, it's actually a simple one. If our goal is to help people understand AI, then we should be just as careful with the words we choose as we are with the technology we build. Because words shape how people think. And when it comes to something as important as AI, that responsibility matters. Thank you for watching.